Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank Congresswoman McIver for co-anchoring this special order hour tonight. You know, you don't grow up in the Commonwealth of Virginia without getting history lessons. And those lessons stuck with me. And I am cognizant that next year, we have the opportunity to celebrate 250 years of an extraordinary, revolutionary, radical idea that had never been tried truly before in the world. The idea that the power of government derives from the people, not from brute force, not from getting it from an inheritance, but the consent of the governed to give power to the government. And why do they do that? To meet their needs, to solve their problems. And it's an idea that sparked my imagination as a child. It's an idea that as I listened to my parents tell stories of what their life was like growing up during the Depression, growing up during Jim Crow, where they didn't always have their needs met, not because of any fault of their own or their parents, but they saw the best of government through the New Deal, where the federal government used its power to help people who couldn't afford to put food on the table, to help people who lost their life savings overnight in a stock market crash, but didn't help all the people. Because at the same time, my parents saw the worst of government, a government that oppresses some for the benefit of a few. And that sparked my imagination again to say, what can I do to make government that force for good, that helps people and solves problems, rather than oppresses some for the benefit of a few? And eventually, that question led me to Congress. And after growing up as a member of Generation X on Schoolhouse Rock, learning about just a bill's journey to becoming a law, I got here and thought, they didn't get it right. Because there is no song for what I've seen since coming to Congress, particularly in the 119th. We stand here today 22 days before government funding expires. We stand here, House and Senate Democrats, ready to pass a bipartisan funding bill that will improve the health of Americans, that will improve access to quality, affordable health care, that will improve the safety and economic well-being of every American. As a matter of fact, our leaders sent a letter to Republican leadership in the House and the Senate to that effect. And the very next day, the president sent down a pocket rescission that the Republican chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee said was unlawful. I happen to agree. And most of this Congress, we have watched a president ignore the will of Congress. Or we have seen, at the president's request, congressional Republicans cut Medicaid, cut SNAP benefits, put lifetime caps on student loans, federal student loans, cut funding that Congress appropriated for cancer research, for the National Institutes of Health, a whole host of things. And people at home are scratching their heads saying, how does this help me? How does this solve my problem? It creates more. I spent the August recess mostly in my district, but I spread out a little bit beyond my district because I'm one of only 2 Virginians on the Energy and Commerce Committee. Healthcare in particular has been very important to me. And so I spent time talking to my constituents and listening, more importantly, to their concerns, what they were worried about, what they were afraid of. And then talking particularly to healthcare providers across the Commonwealth. What I heard was a lot of anxiety and fear. Whether it was my farmers who, because of tariff policies, aren't seeing the kind of orders, particularly for soybeans, that they used to see this time of year to go overseas. Or they can't get the equipment to repair, or parts to repair their equipment because of tariffs. Or businesses that have had to raise prices because they've absorbed them for as long as they can. And yet they're in that between a rock and a hard place where if they raise their prices too much, especially the small business owners, they're going to go out of business. I heard from state legislators who wonder, how am I going to fill the hole in my state budget caused by cuts to Medicaid, cuts to SNAP, the requirements on states to pay more, when I'm also trying to fill the holes in NIH funding, in all the other healthcare-related funding that helps me meet the needs of my constituents. When I'm waiting for the Department of Education to send money as schools are about to start that was appropriated, but we still don't have. And what my state legislators and my local elected officials told me was, I keep hearing people say about how this big, ugly bill is a tax cut, but what it's doing to me is forcing me to either cut services or raise taxes at the state or the local level. We have 22 days for Republicans to decide whether we're going to have a government shutdown. Because you made clear from day one that you're in charge. You've made clear from day one that the president can just decide not to spend money we've appropriated, and that's okay. You've made clear that you can pass reconciliation bills without giving us a seat at the table. So it's up to you whether we will pass funding that meets people's needs and solves their problems and keeps the government open or not. And I'm usually the eternal optimist. I'm a little worried. And Virginia, which has the second highest number of federal employees, and because of the cuts to the federal workforce, now has seen unemployment increase multiple times before the folks that were paid to stay home until September 30th come off of the job rolls. And those people are not able to find jobs because, unlike what our governor says, just because you are a NASA engineer doesn't mean that you're qualified for the healthcare jobs that our healthcare providers can't fill. And the big ugly bill is going to make all of those issues worse. So I want to share some of what I heard from our healthcare providers. You have the academic research hospitals who are worried they can't attract students, particularly medical students, because of the lifetime cap on student loans, which are $257,000. Today, I talked to a physician from Roanoke, Virginia, who has $500,000 in medical school debt. That math doesn't math. When you have enough medical school debt, you have enough debt to pay for somebody's house. And yet, now the next generation of students coming up behind him can only get half of that in federal student loans. That math doesn't math. I visited a dental clinic in Abingdon, Virginia. This dental clinic, before the dental clinic, most people west of Roanoke who needed dental services, they waited until once a year when the Ram Clinic came to Wise County. And you would see the longest line you've ever seen of people waiting to get dental services because they live in a dental desert. Now, this clinic was able to open, and 80% of their patients are Medicaid recipients. The other 20% are uninsured. They're worried what happens when the Medicaid cuts take effect and the 80% starts to decline as to how many are actually paying something. They won't be able to cover their costs. When Medicaid reimbursement rates already were too low for them to completely cover their costs, that's going to be even harder. And the gentleman who represents that area, when I shared with the press what I was hearing from healthcare providers across the state, how they were worried they were going to have to close because of Medicaid cuts, said Democrats are just spreading fear. Well, imagine my surprise, actually not surprised, when last week Augusta Medical Group, which covers parts of Southwest Virginia, announced they were closing 3 primary care centers in Western Virginia as part of its response to the one big, ugly law. It's not hyperbole. You have rural hospitals that are already operating on the margins who now are going to have to provide more uncompensated care. Because when people come off of Medicaid, when the enhanced premium tax credits for purchasing insurance on the exchange of the Affordable Care Act expire if we don't act by the end of this year, and more people become uninsured, they're not going to magically never get sick. They're going to get sick. And when they get sick and show up for care, they're going to come to the emergency rooms, and they're going to be treated. And it's going to be more expensive to treat them. And it's going to be uncompensated care. And guess who pays for that? We do. When our insurance premiums go up, or when the price of care goes up to recover the costs from private insurers. And all of these jobs that are being lost, that's also health insurance, employer-provided health insurance. So that's even more uninsured. And my colleagues on the Energy and Commerce Committee said, well, we're just trying to make sure we're making Medicaid sustainable for future generations. But that bill did not do a thing to address the underlying reasons healthcare costs are going up. It just provided that fewer people will end up getting health insurance. 17 million, up to 17 million, according to the Congressional Budget Office. I heard a lot about the SNAP benefit cuts. I heard from recipients who were worried, but I also heard from grocery stores, rural and urban. I represent Surry County. Surry County has one grocery store. It opened last year. Prior to that, it didn't have a grocery store for 20 years. That meant that people in Surry County drove 30 minutes to go grocery shopping. They couldn't get a lot of perishable items, probably what would fit in a cooler. But the Surry market helped with that. Now, the Surry market, it took forever, but we were able to help them become SNAP eligible to receive SNAP benefits. And because they knew that certain times a month, the SNAP recipients, mostly the seniors living in 2 senior facilities and walking distance to the grocery store, they knew when they came, they would buy enough fresh food, produce, and meat that it made it sustainable for the market to buy fresh food in bulk and know it would be sold. And that's 10% of their revenue. They're worried that when SNAP benefits, when people lose their SNAP benefits, they can't count on that bulk anymore. It's going to be harder for them to keep their doors open. I heard the same thing from the market in Churchill in downtown East End Richmond. Both of these areas were food deserts before these stores opened. Oh, by the way, a lot of their customers are also Medicaid recipients. So the same people who can lose access to their food benefits and lose access to their health care in the HUD funding bill could lose access to rental assistance as well. I heard a lot about FEMA cuts. We had a water infrastructure roundtable. I represent cities that have water infrastructure that's over 100 years old. And one of them received a grant to help upgrade its water treatment plant and its water infrastructure that failed earlier this year during a storm. And they got a resiliency grant from FEMA to help upgrade that infrastructure so that they would know when there is a natural disaster, the water infrastructure will survive it, and the people in the region can have clean drinking water. Well, the Department of Homeland Security canceled that grant, saying it had nothing to do with natural disasters. I think we all want to be sure that a water infrastructure system will provide clean drinking water when there's a hurricane or a tropical storm or another natural disaster. So these are just a few of the things that I heard from my constituents about the price of everything's going up. From child care to health care to housing to utility bills, you name it. So far, the funding actions of the President and Congress has made it worse. We passed an energy bill last week that gutted the very programs that help people weatherize their homes to reduce their energy costs, cut the very department that has that program in half. And people are asking me, weren't you elected to help people and solve problems? And I was. But we got to work together to do it. And just because Republicans are in the majority does not mean that you only govern over Republicans. But Democrats, Independents, and Republicans in Virginia's 4th District and across the Commonwealth want us to come together to help them and solve their problems. That's what the best of government does, not make them worse. And they made very clear, the people made very clear in November, and they continue to make clear today, cost of everything is too high. And when I talk to Republicans, Democrats, and Independents, rural, urban, and suburban, no matter where they were born, no matter what language they speak, no matter the color of their skin, no matter who they love, no matter how they worship, they want 3 things. They want to know they live in a thriving, healthy community. They want to know that they have a job that allows them not just to pay their bills, but to have a fair shot at a better life for their children than they had. They want to know when they get sick, they can go to the doctor and not go bankrupt. And every single person that I talked to in my district during the August period said, it's getting harder to do that, and I'm afraid it's not going to get better. We answer to them. When we all took our oath of office, we took an oath of office to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States and to do our jobs to the best of our ability. And our job is when we see people who are hurting and we have the ability to help. Or as Matthew 25 says, when we see somebody who's hungry, we feed them. When we see someone who is homeless, we give them shelter. When we see someone who is sick, we provide them care. When we see a stranger, we welcome them. When someone is in prison, we visit them. Or at a minimum, how about we make sure they're in conditions that are humane? We can do a lot better, and the American people deserve better. But it is going to require us to put politics aside and focus on the people. We have 22 days to do it, Mr. Speaker. We have 22 days to decide, are we going to come together, find common ground, fund this government in a way that helps people and puts people over politics, or are we just going to let it all shut down? I didn't come here to shut down the government, but I also didn't come here to vote for a bill that strips food out of children's mouths, that strips health care away from the people that need it. That's not what my constituents sent me here to do. That's not what this government has done in the past when people were hurting. I end where I started. My parents saw the best of government, and they saw the worst of government. If we had another hour, I could walk down the path of how a lot of what I'm seeing in 2025 reminds me of what my grandparents saw in 1925, or what my great-grandparents saw in 1905. But we only have one special order hour and not two. So let me just say, let's find our better angels and show the American people the best of government, where we come together and put people over politics and meet their needs and solve problems together. With that, I yield back.